Hello, today we're going to do the Guess a Number Lab. So I think I can safely say that this is probably the most difficult thing we'll write in the class. I don't know that, we'll do things that are probably more complicated, but in terms of overall structure, this one's kind of hard. And it's hard, well, it's got a lot going on. But the thing that makes it difficult in the way we're going to do it is that we're going to kind of stumble our way through it and keep adding loops afterwards. Remember, the most important part of programming is coming up with a plan. And so we're kind of skipping the plan. And we're just going to write it like one logical piece at a time. And then that's going to become a loop. And then that's going to be inside of another loop. And putting a loop inside of a loop afterwards, that's poor design, right? If I wanted to do this the right way, it would be pretty straightforward. But the parts you're going to struggle with are going to be the parts where you put a loop inside of a loop. So my point is, this is a YouTube video. You should pause it and be careful about what you're writing, especially when you're putting a loop into it. That's just my beforehand advice. Let me show you how this thing's going to work when you're done. So we're going to create a guess a number game. So guess a number, right? And I put in 50, and it says that's too low, so I say 75. And that's too low, so I say 87. And that's too high, and now I go 82. And that's too high, so 77. That's too low. Oh, I don't know. I don't like the way this is going. Here we're at 80. Too low. So I guess it's 81, right? Which I only get 7 guesses, so just in time. So you see what it is. It's a guess a number game. So it created some random number. And I got 7 guesses. I'll show you what happens when you do just like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Right, you lose. Max guesses exceeded. Number was 15. Right, so that's what it's supposed to do. If that makes sense to you, go ahead and go write the program. This is kind of the way that I'm going to write it out in different phases. Like if I was going to be smart and do a better job of this, I would plan it out and go, okay, there's going to be a loop, and inside that loop there's going to be a loop. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to start writing code, which is the wrong way to program, but I can't really guide you through the planning process from here. So in phase 1, we're going to generate a random number, ask the user to enter a number, and then we're going to validate that number and make sure that it's actually an integer. And if it's an integer, we're going to turn it into an integer. And if it's not, so it's just a number, actually. You could guess 26.4 if you wanted, but you'll lose. And then we're going to make them keep guessing until they put in an actual number. So that's data validation. That's the first thing in the lecture. So if you're like, I don't know how to do that, let me remind you that you need to do the lectures. You should not expect to be successful in this course if you don't do the lectures and the labs. So that's phase 1. We're just kind of making sure the user puts in a valid guess. I guess I didn't model that. I'll show you what I mean. So if I put in 6, like the word 6, well, it says enter a number. Next up, we're going to write an if statement. It's going to say too high, too low, or correct. That's kind of the easy part. And then we're going to repeat that until they get the number. All right, that's what you think of in a guess a number program. This validation, that's kind of the thing you wouldn't think of, probably. Part 3 is keep track of the number of guesses. So every time they guess, we're going to count a guess. And then we're going to take this part here and we're going to add in the number of guesses. So initially, we're not tracking the number of guesses. Well, this is just the way I'm going to do it. If you're going to do it on your own, which is I encourage you to do, then you can keep track of guesses from the beginning. But we're going to add that in. So instead of too high, it'll be too high. That's 3 guesses. And then the last part is we set a maximum number of guesses. And then we're going to, if you reach the maximum number of guesses, we'll say you lose. The number was whatever. And then when you're done, you're going to submit a Python file. So I'm going to get rid of all this and start writing it. You do have the tools to do this, especially if you paid attention to the lecture. So you could just try and do it on your own. The only thing is, like, my solution is not going to line up with your solution if you do that. I encourage you to try and do it on your own and see how it goes, and then see how I do it. I'll probably do it differently than you do it. Actually, I'm sure I will. All right, so first thing is some block comment. All right, that's going to be your name, the day, what this project is. You do that. That's step 1. Step 2 is we want to generate a random number. Now, I don't know if you remember about random numbers, but the thing is you need to import random. You can't just say I want a random number. You got to say, hey, I want to do random numbers. So now I'm going to generate a random number between 1 and 100. This is the number to be guessed. You should come up with a name for this variable. Go ahead, pause the video, think about it. What do you want to do? What do you want to call this number? I don't know what you want to call it. Probably don't call it random, because that'd be confusing. I mean, it is random, but, you know, you're already writing random a bunch of times. I usually call it target. Or, here's a terrible name, the number to guess. You can come up with a name for that variable. I know you can do it. And so that's going to be, I'm going to assign that to an input. And I'll say enter a number between 1 and 100. Colon, space, right? Because it's important the way my output looks. All right, so now, you see how that looks? And I put in 99 and nothing happens. And I put in fish and nothing happens, whatever, right? It's something is getting assigned to that. If your code says the number to guess, you need to start writing your own variable names. You can't just copy mine. It's not going to work for you. If you named it guess, that is a bad variable name because the user is going to guess a number. This is not guess. This is some number that you're guessing. I don't know. Call it CPU num. I don't know what it is. It's something. It needs to make sense to you. I'm going to call it target. If I see it called target in your code, I'll know that you're just copying me. I did say that I was going to call it that, so I get it. If you call it target because that makes sense to you, that's okay. But you need to come up with your own variable names. I'm telling you, the people that struggle with this assignment are the ones who don't know why they're naming their variables, what they're naming them. All right, so that was an easy part. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to print that out just for the testing purposes, and I'm telling you, you need to get rid of this by the time it's all said and done. It's just going to show you that you're getting a random number. Oh, actually, I haven't generated a random number. Oops. Oh, I meant, oops, I skipped a step. Not a big deal. So I got the number. Oh, yeah, I crossed this all up. All right, oops, fine. Not a big deal. All right, so this is going to be called guess, actually. This is the user's guess. I was crossing up the random number. So target is going to be random.randint. You might be wondering, oh, that's a pretty big mistake. Why don't you edit the video? Because it wasn't a big mistake. It was easy to fix. So every time you run this, why is it not printing? Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm just being weird. That print should go here. All right. I had to change some things around. No big deal. So 7 is the number. Do you see that? So I run it, and the number's 11. That's weird. They're kind of low numbers, but at some point, that is crazy that they're all between like 1 and 11 so far. 70. All right. So here's where I create that random number. Sorry, I crossed some things up. Random.randint, and then you specify the range. That was that. I just did the steps out of order because I just did this. I just ran through this project a minute ago to try and make sure that I did it smoothly. So I'm kind of crossing things up. So here's my target, right? Here's that number I'm going to guess. So I know I was just ridiculing you a minute ago for calling things. Well, I was probably kind of right. So this is the number that the user is going to guess. I don't know what you want to call it. My guess, user guess, the guess. It's the thing that they're guessing, right? When you say enter a number, it's that thing. You could call it number. That's a pretty terrible name because that tells you nothing about it. User number, I don't know. All reasonable things. I'm going to call it guess because it is the user's guess. And this right here, that's the target. That's the thing that you're trying to guess. So you've got a guess, you've got a target, and you're going to compare that guess to the target and say, hey, was it high or was it low? All right, so that was A and B. Don't worry, I'm not going to take 10 minutes on every step. So, all right, so validate whether the guess is actually a number. So how do we do that? Well, I showed you how to do that in the PowerPoint. And this is the most complicated part of the thing, I think. So how are we going to do that? Well, I showed you can do it with this function called isNumeric. So I'll say if guess.isNumeric equals true, right? So this function returns true if the thing can be converted into a number, and it returns false if it can't. Then I will say, so it says to, Actually, I mean, you can write this however you want. How about we'll do the false first, I guess. It doesn't really matter. You can check for true or false. So let's just say, hey, this is when the person didn't enter an actual number. So I will yell at them, which means print, enter a number. Right, I'm saying, hey, you messed up. And the else is going to be where I go, hey, okay, that did look like a valid number. And so I'm telling you, you're going to need to convert that. So remember, when you get something from an input box, it's always a string. We're going to need to turn it into an integer. All right, so we do that like this. So guess equals int guess. Right, that's a type conversion. So remember, this thing's a string, which didn't matter until now. So we got this thing, and it was a string. And we said, hey, does that string look like a number? If it doesn't look like a number, then we say enter a number. If it does look like a number, then we turn it into an integer. This is a pretty weird one to test, because not much happens. But if you put in something like 5, that's not, it just ends. But if you put in something like dummy, then it says enter a number. So it is validating our input, but the problem is it's only doing it once, right? Like if the user's just too silly to enter a number, well, I don't know, nothing really happens. So we want to make this inside of a loop is the idea. Not this. We do not want to generate a random number over and over again. We just want to repeat this process until the user gets it right. So this is where I'm saying we're going to retroactively drop a loop in here. So how do I want to do that? I'm going to use a flag. And so I'm going to call it, this flag is going to represent whether it's a valid input or not. So I'm going to call it valid num. And I'm going to initialize it to false. So this is a flag I'm going to use for the purpose of breaking out of a loop. Right, it's valid num. It represents whether the user has entered a valid input or not. Valid input, valid num, I don't know. You could just call it flag, but that's probably a bad idea because you want to be a little more descriptive than that. And then I'm going to have this loop here, so I'll say while valid num equals false. Colon, right, so this is a loop. So now notice the scope of a loop is determined by indentation. And you see how this is not indented? There's nothing inside of this. And this is where I'm saying if we designed this better, we wouldn't have this problem, but now we do. So select all that junk right there, all that stuff where you get the number, and press tab. If you didn't know, you can tab it in wholesale like that. So now all of that is inside of that loop. That is sloppy. Whenever you end up doing that, it kind of means that you could have done a better job of designing things. I knew I was going to repeat this process, so it would have been easier to have the loop first, but I just did the input part and then we put it in a loop. Alright, so notice it starts off as false. So then when it hits line 10, it's always going to be false. So this loop is going to run at least once. And yeah, let's do equal. It's a check, not an assignment. It still doesn't work right. Let's do 43. Do you see how it just keeps kind of going? Like nothing really happens? The problem is we need a way to break out of this loop. So when do we want to break out of this loop? I'm saying we're going to break out of this loop by flipping this flag to true. So I'm going to do it right below here. So right, this else is where you get to if you entered a valid input. So I'll say valid num equals true. That's what you call flipping the flag. So now, if we sit in here and we say caterpillar, right, it just says enter a number, red, 1. It'll keep doing this forever until you put in 6, and then you're out of this loop. Right, it's pretty anticlimactic because nothing happens, but you're out of this loop. And at this point, we've done phase 1. All right, so we generated a random number, printed it out just for testing purposes, initialized a flag to false. We wrote a loop that's going to run as long as that flag's false. We grab the input, see if the input's a number. If the input's not a number, then we just do a message and leave that flag false. If it does look like a number, then we turn it into an integer, flip the flag, and we're out of the loop. That's phase 1. Phase 2, this is like the most straightforward part of the whole thing. Write an if statement to display feedback to the console, either too high or too low or correct. Repeat steps 1 through. Repeat this whole dang thing until the number's guessed. right? Because every time the user guesses, we got to make sure that it's valid or not. So this is a loop here. This loop's done. So after this, I'm gonna go. I'll just write my ifs. All right. So I'll say if. All right. So I want to compare the guess to the target. I'm telling you, you can write this part. You should not wait for me to write this part. Pause the video and write these inequalities. All right. Now that you've done that, if you didn't, you cheated yourself out of it, because this is as straightforward as an elif gets. You're comparing two numbers, and it's either too high, too low, or it's correct. And the way you write this doesn't really matter. So I'll say if guess is greater than target. I think that's what my variables were called. I really don't remember. Here's guess. Then that means print too high. You see what I mean? This is as simple as an elif can get. So if you didn't get it started and you were just waiting to copy off of me, not a great start, but you can finish this thing. That's all we're really doing here. All right, now that you're back, I'll do elif. Guess is less than target. Print too low. And else, there's only one other situation. It's you win. You see what I mean now, where I say, if you can't write this elif, I mean, that's as basic of an elif as you're ever going to see. There's nothing even interesting about it. So the problem now is, I'll show you, run this thing. The number's 40. Do you see why I have that here? It helps for testing purposes. I go 41. Let's make sure it says too high. And then the game's over, which is not really right. Now it's 13, so let me try a 12. Too low. Okay. Do you see this process of testing? I did one too low, one too high, and then I'm going to guess it. Right? This is how I make sure that my logic here is working. If your logic's not working, let me just tell you, from experience, it's probably... Your problem probably is that you have your variable names wrong. That's my guess. Case sensitivity matters. That's my guess. I can't help you. All right, but we want this to happen forever, okay? So we don't just want like that to happen once because it doesn't work. So this is supposed to happen until you win. So in other words, this and this need to be wrapped in a while loop. So I guess I'll do that. This is going to be a big loop. All right, so I'll say while. What's my deal here? What am I trying to do? While what? Let me do a total hack thing for a minute, and I'm going to tell you I don't like this, but it's just the easiest way to do it. I know I shouldn't even do this, but I'm going to do it. I'll just say while true. That's weird, right? So do this forever is pretty much what that means. You generally don't want to do that. It's kind of looking like an infinite loop, but just to get things functioning. All right, and so now we need to find the scope of this loop. So hey, everything below that point, starting with where you flip that flag, all of that stuff needs to get tabbed in. So select it all and press tab. And now all of that is inside of this loop, right? So this is going to happen forever now, pretty much is how this is going to go, which is great for testing, right? Now I go 28, and that's too low, and I say 30, and that's too high, and I say 29, and it says you win. But you see, I can never get out of this because it's an infinite loop. Like I said, this was a hack job. So how do you get out of a situation like this? All right, I'll show you one way to get out of it. I don't like it. I'll just show you. It's kind of fun, though. So where's the part where I want to break out of this loop? Well, not if it's too high, not if it's too low. It's if you win. And so there's something called a break. And I don't want you to do that. I'm going to fix it in a minute with something better, but I'll show you. That means break out of the structure that you're in. And so now if I go 59, I'm still in my loop. If I go 57, I'm still in my loop. But if I do 58, it's going to say you win. And then it's going to do that break, and it's going to pop me out of that loop. So you might be thinking, oh, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the most logical thing. Breaks breaks create code which is difficult to read. Like, let's say you're like, what does this break you out of? Why is it? We can do a little better, so let's do a little better. So instead of this while true, let's use a flag. And I'm going to call this flag game on, or something. Game over, maybe? And I'll set it to false, because the game's not over. And I'll say while game over is equal to false. Do you see how that's way more readable? I mean, it was just while true. It's like, what? What was that all about? Why does it break here? You know, so instead of that, we're going to use a flag. And so we'll initialize it to false. So it's going to be false. And then here, instead of a break, we'll say game over equals true. So the only way we're ever going to flip that flag is if you get it right. And then when that flag flips, you're done with your loop. And we can test this out. Well, I don't know what I do. Gosh, I keep doing that over and over again today. When I was practicing, I kept doing single equal signs, which is weird. 27 is too high. 25 is too low. 26, hopefully it says you win and breaks us out of the loop. And it does. All right, sorry about that. I caught that phone call fast enough that I'm just going to keep going. All right, so we are now through phase 1, and we're through phase 2. We are most of the way there. It might not feel like we're most of the way there, but we really are most of the way there. Granted, there is some more difficult stuff left. It's kind of concatenation, though. All right, so now we're going to keep track of the number of guesses and increment the number of guesses after each guess and alter the input from phase 2 to say, you know, you just did so many guesses. This is not a lot of lines of code, but it does introduce some opportunities to mess up. All right, so where should we put this thing? Number of guesses. I'm saying outside of the loop. So I'll call it num guesses. You can call it something else if you want. I really don't know what else you'd call this, though. So let's say we start off with no guesses. And then here's this loop, right? This one valid. This is checking whether the user put in a valid guess or not. I'm going to tell you, I think there's 2 valid places where you could increment this. It depends how mean you want to be. Like, you could increment it right here, like valid, or sorry, it's called num guesses. You could do it here. And so what that would mean is every time the user enters, you know, cat, I'll show you. Well, I'm not going to show you. I'm just going to say you could put it here. And that would mean every time they enter something that's not a number, it counts as a guess. Should that count? I'm sure some of you think yes, it should, and some of you think no, it shouldn't. I think it should. I mean, if you can't enter a number when it says to enter a number, I'm fine with counting that as a guess. But I feel like most people don't like to put it there. Most people like to make sure that we only count it as a guess if it looks like a valid guess, which means that it would go here. Well, it could go a lot of places. And notice that, do you notice how my cursor was here? That's going to be a scope issue, so I have to tab in. And I'll say num guesses plus equals 1. So I'm going to increment it before I evaluate it. So I'm incrementing it right after I've determined that it is valid. You could also increment it down here if you wanted. You could. I'm just doing it here. To me, this is where it makes sense, because it's like, okay, we know that the number is valid, so I add 1 to num guesses. All right, and so we also need to, so we're incrementing it. So it's going to get incremented regardless of what you do. And then, well, I don't know, let's just compile it and make sure it works. It works. So now we got to do this, the output thing. So instead of too high, we're going to say too high. That, how about the easiest way to do this is like num guesses. And then we can just tack it on like num guesses. Too low. Yeah, this is a good idea. I just came up with this way of doing this, and I think. Oh, actually, how about number of? We can't be that lazy. Number of. All right, I know this is not going well. That's okay. Number of guesses. Colon space. Break the string. Concatenate. And I know this isn't going to work, but we'll talk about why it doesn't work in a minute. You win. I don't know. Should we say number of guesses? Or I'm trying to think, what should I say here? I don't know. Do I need to say the number of guesses if you win? I don't know. Maybe. I guess I'll just do the same thing. Like, I'm thinking that you'd be proud of yourself if you got it in one guess or something. And you'll see this is not going to work, and it's really frustrating that it doesn't work. It almost works, though. All right, the number's 4. So I put in 4, and it says, cannot concatenate a string and an int. So, okay, I mean, you've seen this before, so this is an integer. You know it's an integer because we're incrementing it, so you're going to convert that into a string. So you got to do an explicit type conversion on that, which is annoying. Very annoying. But you have to. That's how Python makes you do this. Which is weird, because in every other language, when you concatenate a string to a numeric type, it converts it to a string. I can't understand why it wouldn't automatically do that. But it doesn't. All right. Oh, 100. That's kind of interesting. 99. All right. Too low. One guess. 1. Too low. One guess. 100. You win. Number of guesses 3. Okay. So that was... just had some concatenation and such. And you notice we've got quite a few variables and flags going on at this point. I understand people get hung up on this. I'll do a slow scroll through the code. But the problem is, if you're just trying to copy what I'm doing, you're going to be having trouble because your variables are not the same as mine. And if you are not being careful with your variable names, you probably have all kinds of spelling issues and case sensitivity issues. And then the last part, we want to set a number of maximum guesses and compare the number of guesses. And if they do too many guesses, that's another way to lose the game. All right, so let's do this. So you got num guesses. Let's go max guesses. I'm telling you, if the number is between 1 and 100, the number of max guesses you should give them is 7 for a competitive game. If you do less than 7, people are going to lose a lot. If you do more than 7, then it becomes easy. So I don't care. You could do 10 if you want. But 7's probably the appropriate thing. All right, so where do we check to see if you've exceeded your max guesses? Well, you could check in a lot of places, but I'm going to do it the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to say not here when you're looking at this, right? Like this is just validating. I'm going to do it right after this if block. So notice I'm going to place my cursor here. Notice if I do an if block here, I want to point out that this is not inside of this while. You can tell by the indentation. So this needs to be tabbed in. So now it's inside of that loop. So I validate the input. I give them feedback. Now I check if you've used too many guesses. So it's if num guesses is greater than or equal to, what did I call it? Max guesses, probably. If I know myself, I called it max guesses. Yes. So if num guesses is equal to or exceeds max guesses, then print you lose. The number was concatenate, and let's just do the conversion. And we're going to put the target here. And also, we need to flip that flag to true. Right? Before, the only way you could win is by getting it right. And by winning, we flip the flag to true. And now, so if you exceed the max number of guesses, then we're going to tell you, and we're going to flip that flag, and the game's going to be over. We can test this out. I'll go 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. You lose. The number was 4. And that, my friend, is the Guess a Number Lab. Like I said, it's complicated because it's got... well, you could do it different ways. It's got 2 flags, right? It's got I don't know. Like I said, flags. You don't have to use flags. You could not use flags. If you did this and you don't have any flags, that's okay. You can clean up some white space. Just here's a note for you. When I'm looking at your code, some people will do stuff like this. Don't do that. It just makes your code hard to read. 1 line of white space is fine. More than that, and I don't know what you're doing. And white space at the end, okay, fine. I'm not going to scroll down past a certain point. But this is how I did it. There's a lot of ways you could do this, but this meets the specifications for the project. And let me just show you weird stuff. Like, I mean, oh, you know how I showed you that you can tab stuff in? That's not what I wanted. That's not what you want to do. But I'll tell you, you can also untab things. It's shift tab. You see how shift tab, like, all right, so tab goes in 1, shift tab goes back 1. Shift tab is one of those things that I think you only use in when you're programming, and it's exactly for that situation. There's all kinds of ways you could mess this up. You could have all kinds of messed up indentation, right? Like that. That's, to me, the thing I like the least about Python is the scope. Like, it's not clear what's inside of what. It's entirely based on this indentation. In most languages, they have like a curly brace that opens and closes like that, and you can very clearly see where a block of code ends with those curly braces. You're like, oh, runs from there to there. But in Python, there's no curly braces. Just everything's indentation. And so if you really are having problems, well, it's probably because you don't know what you named your variables, or you did some typos or something like that, or it's going to be scope. So if it really got away from you, my best advice is always to just start over from scratch. If you've stared at your code and you can't figure out what's wrong with it, well, you probably would do better by just rewriting the whole thing. Alright, so that's the Guess the Number Lab. Like I said, it's difficult, but that's why I gave you a solution video. Thanks for watching.